know that most of what you've seen, read, or heard about Billy the Kid is untrue? My name is Gail Cooper. I'm a medical doctor and forensic psychiatrist. My specialty is murder case consultation for the defense. For 20 years, I've used my expertise to uncover the real Billy the Kid. Researching over 40,000 pages of archival documents and books, I've written the revisionist history. It's shocking, it's liberating, and I've written books demolishing the hoaxes, hijacking the history. My talks will share with you what I've found. Cover-ups, misinformation, and fakery, to use Old West lingo, will bite the dust. This talk exposes a Billy the Kid imposter hoax by a missionary nun. The information is from my book, Blandina Segale, the nun who rode on Billy the Kid, sleuthing a foisted frontier fable. The most surprising Billy the Kid imposter is Sister Blandina Segale, a 19th century Sisters of Charity of Cincinnati missionary nun in the frontier. She impersonated being Billy the Kid's pal in her alleged journal, which she later serialized as magazine articles and put in a book. In fact, Sister Blandina had zero contact with Billy Bonnie. I named her fabrication the Nun'S Tale hoax. She featured a murderous Colorado highwayman bettered by her spirituality. Into her 90s and retired in her Cincinnati convent, she still told her Billy the Kid tales. Topping it off, she's now in the running for sainthood. Her modern backers are also unusual. Unlike the unsavory characters populating Billy the Kid hoaxes in upcoming talks, they're honorable. Her petitioner for sainthood, Alan Sanchez, heads a community health program in Albuquerque, New Mexico, building on St. Joseph Hospital, founded by Blandina. And the archivist for the Sisters of Charity of Cincinnati aided my research. Blandina's backers, like me, wanted to solve the mystery of if or why Blandina did it. Did an editor insert spicy outlaw tales to her publications without her knowledge? Did she mistake another outlaw for Billy the Kid? Was she writing playful fiction? Was there a forgotten document in the archives that explained it all? Sister Blandina was born in northern Italy on January 23, 1850, as Rosa Maria Segale, the youngest of 5 children. She was 5 when her family emigrated to Cincinnati, Ohio. At 16, after attending a Sisters of Charity of Cincinnati school, she entered their order. She chose the name Blandina after Saint Blandina, a martyred ancient Roman Christian girl. Her sister, Maria Maddalena, entered with her as Sister Justina. At 22, in 1872, Blandina was sent alone by her order to Trinidad, Colorado Territory as a missionary and teacher. Before leaving Ohio, she claimed to begin a journal to share future experiences with her sister Justina. She stayed in the frontier for 21 years. Intelligent and energetic, she founded schools, hospitals, social services programs. She was in Trinidad from December 9, 1872 to 1877, building its school. There, she claimed her first meetings with, quote, Billy the Kid and his gang. In 1877, she was transferred to New Mexico Territory, Santa Fe. There she founded St. Vincent Hospital and, until 1881, ministered to the poor, miners, railway construction workers, orphans, Hispanic people, and Native Americans. In this period, she claimed to visit Billy the Kid in the Santa Fe jail. In 1881, she was transferred to Albuquerque, where she built St. Vincent Academy, taught school, and defended rights of Native Americans and Mexicans. In 1889, she was returned to Trinidad for a failed crusade for nuns to wear religious garb as public school teachers. In 1892, she was transferred to Pueblo, Colorado, then brought back to Ohio in 1894. In 1897, in Cincinnati, she and her fellow nun and sister, Justina, founded the Santa Maria Institute to provide social services for local Italian immigrants. From 1900 to 1901, Blandina was sent to Albuquerque and founded St. Joseph Hospital. In 1926, at 76 in Cincinnati, Blandina founded a magazine for her Santa Maria Institute. In it, from 1926 to 1931, she serialized her frontier journal as At the End of the Santa Fe Trail. Importantly, she claimed to destroy the original at that time. In 1931, she went to Rome as a petitioner for Mother Elizabeth Seton's sainthood. She also successfully petitioned for sainthood of 17th century Native American Kateri Tekakwitha. In 1932, Blandina incorporated her magazine articles into a book, also titled At the End of the Santa Fe Trail. On February 23, 1941, at 91, Blandina died at the Sisters of Charity Mother House, apparently never recanting her Billy the Kid tales. Blandina's Billy the Kid tale is in her book's Wikipedia profile. Excerpted, it stated, during her missionary work, she met Billy the Kid. She came to learn from one of her students that a member of the gang, led by the famed outlaw Billy the Kid, had been seriously wounded. She received a tip that Billy the Kid was coming to her town to scalp the 4 doctors who had refused to treat his friend's gunshot wound. Segale nursed the friend to health, and when Billy came to Trinidad, Colorado to thank her, she asked him to abandon his violent plan. He agreed. Later, Billy the Kid and his gang attempted to rob the covered wagon in which she was traveling. When he looked inside, he saw Segale. At that, Billy the Kid simply tipped his hat and rode off in deference to the debt he owed her. And she visited and took care of Billy the Kid and other prisoners confined in the main prison in Santa Fe, New Mexico. So, Sister Blandina's impeccable and productive religious life had a quirk. It featured her pious taming of a sinner, except her sinner, Billy, had no match to reality. Nevertheless, Billy the Kid became the hook for Blandina's fame. Here are examples. A May 1930 Santa Maria Institute magazine article titled Honor for Sister Blandina quoted New Mexico Governor Richard Charles Dillon. This journal of Blandina Segale's is a valuable contribution to the history of the Southwest. In 1948, 7 years after Blandina's death, a revised edition of her book was issued, edited by Sisters of Charity nun Teresa Martin. She added an introduction, bibliography, footnotes, index, and an illustration of the famous tintype captioning it, Billy the Kid. On June 15th, 1949, the Cathectical Guild Educational Society of St. Paul, Minnesota, published a topics comic book titled Sister Blandina Meets Billy the Kid. Its cover art had her and a Billy the Kid dressed like a Mexican dandy on a rearing horse. It featured her nursing Billy's injured gang member and getting Billy's gratitude. The November 11th, 1957 Rocky Mountain News ran How Colorado Nun Saved 4 from Killer. It was about producer Sam Engels contemplated film about Blandina saving the 4 Trinidad doctors from scalping by Billy the Kid. The Victorian magazine for January 1961 had The Nun Who Knew Billy the Kid. Throughout her years in the West, Sister Blandina continued to be the friend of Billy the Kid. Though she did not succeed in converting him, her influence on Billy showed the pioneer world the power of a nun's prayerful courage. In 1966, a CBS special on another of her alleged outlaw encounters became the TV program The Fastest Nun in the West, a cute quip later used for her alleged Billy the Kid contacts. On July 21st, 1991, Albuquerque's Our Sunday Visitor had When Billy the Kid Met the Cowboy Nun, The Adventures of Sister Blandina, read like a pulp western, except they're all true. Then, someone broke ranks. On August 30th, 1991, in Trinidad, Colorado's Chronicle, a reporter, Richard Loudon, wrote, "Local legend about Sister Blandina and Billy the Kid is a case of mistaken ID. He claimed her Billy was an outlaw named William Pond, alias Billy Leroy. Misled by a fictionalized book, Loudon claimed Leroy was also called Billy the Kid. So, Loudon started the Two Billy the Kid's Coincidence Apology for Blandina, but he was ignored. In 1996, the Sisters of Charity published a new edition of At the End of the Santa Fe Trail. It upgraded to a photo of the Billy the Kid tintype. On October 12, 2012, another naysayer emerged. In the American Catholic, Donald R. McLaren printed Sister Blandina and the Original Billy the Kid. He recycled Richard Loudon's claim of Billy Leroy, whom he called the Original Billy the Kid. In 2014, the Sisters of Charity reprinted Blandina's book. Its new preface by her petitioner Alan Sanchez omitted Billy the Kid since he believed the Leroy coincidence, but the book illustrated Blandina's scalper Billy with the Billy the Kid tintype. A July 19, 2014 Daily Mail article was titled, "Fastest Nun in the West. Sister Blandina Segale, who stopped Billy the Kid, may become a saint." On August 31, 2015, Alan Sanchez attempted clarification with Catholic news agency's Albuquerque reporter Mary Rizak. She wrote, "Nuns, Guns, and the Wild West, the extraordinary tale of Sister Blandina." She merely called Blandina's outlaw Billy the Kid, parenthesis, William Leroy. A November 13, 2015, Associated Press article, "Nun Who Stood Up to Billy the Kid Moves Towards Sainthood," twisted Alan Sanchez's claim of having validated Blandina's other journal claims to validating those about Billy the Kid. For November 2016's Smithsonian Magazine, Hannah Nordhaus wrote, making the case for the next American saint, Sister Blandina Segale showed true grit while caring for orphans and outlaws in New Mexico. Nordhaus used Alan Sanchez's two Billy the Kids coincidence and cited William Leroy. Most press stuck to the original story. A 2017 Albuquerque Journal article was titled Sister Blandina TV Plot Filming in New Mexico. The reporter proclaimed, Sister Blandina is a nun that interacted with everyone from Billy the Kid to Mark Twain. This article prompted my suspicion of a hoax and led me to contacting Alan Sanchez. Billy the Kid hoaxers in the first half of the 20th century, like Blandina Segale, had an insurmountable problem. There existed no real history books to build their fictions. If copied, the existing semi-fictional sources had telltale errors. Unknown was the history I presented in talks 1 to 41 about the freedom fight against the Santa Fe Ring, in which Billy, as the teenage hero of the Lincoln County War, was betrayed in his pardon appeal, was pursued by the Secret Service, was unjustly sentenced to be hanged, escaped, and was finally killed by a ring-beholden lawman. In fact, editor Teresa Martin's added bibliography in the 1948 edition of Blandina's book named some of her sources. The 1927 reprint of Pat Garrett's 1882, The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid, Walter Noble Burns's 1926, The Saga of Billy the Kid, and Ralph Emerson Twitchell's 1911, Leading Facts of New Mexico History. My sleuthing began with the key question: did Teresa Martin write the Billy the Kid entries in 1948? So I compared them to Blandina's 1932 book. They matched. They also matched the magazine articles by Blandina herself. So the Nun'S tale preceded Teresa Martin. But something was odd. The journal entry dates differed wildly in those publications. A journal is a diary. It fixes events by dates. So the next step was examining the entries for clues. In Blandina's lifetime, they were in her magazine series and her 1932 book. The 1948 book was Teresa Martin's work. All had 14 Billy the Kid entries. 3 or 4 of them claimed Blandina's personal contact with him. Other historical figures were also named, including Blandina's claimed encounter with famous Apache chief Victorio. Journal entry 1 gave Blandina seeing Billy the Kid's flamboyantly dressed gang member in Trinidad. The magazine and books all dated to September 1876. Excerpted, Blandina wrote, "The Trinidad Enterprise, the only paper published here, in its last issue gave an exciting description of how a member of Bill's gang painted red the town of Cimarron." Note that the Trinidad Enterprise didn't exist in 1876. The paper was the Enterprise and Chronicle. Cimarron was a New Mexico Territory town 51 miles south of Trinidad. For 1876, no gang member violence was in its Cimarron News and Press. She continued, "Yesterday, One of the vigilant committee said, "I want you to see one of Billy's gang, the one who caused such fright in Cimarron." Billy's accomplice headed toward us. He was mounted on a spirited stallion and was dressed as the toreros, bullfighters, dress in old Mexico, cowboy sombrero fantastically trimmed, red velvet knee breeches, green velvet short coat. The impression made on me was of intense loathing, and I will candidly acknowledge of fear also. Under the same entry, Blandina encounters that outlaw again, learns his name is Schneider, and nurses him for a gunshot thigh wound from fellow gang member Happy Jack, whom he shot dead in their duel. To her he confesses his crimes of robbing, murdering, shooting cows, and scalping. Blandina explains that God could forgive him. Under the same entry, Schneider confided to Blandina that Billy the Kid planned to scalp Trinidad's 4 doctors in revenge for refusing to treat him. She listed the 4 doctors as Michael Beshore, 2 Menger brothers, and a Dr. Palmer. In an entry dated Feast of All Saints, 1876, Blandina wrote that repentant Schneider had died of his wound in the presence of his mother. Blandina had a variation in her magazine. It was dated Cherry Season, 1884, claimed as from notes in her old trunk. Here, Schneider, Schneider, is Snyder. The shooting is at the Raton Pass, and she nursed him in Trinidad for 9 months before he died. And his being a Billy the Kid gang member is just in a parenthesis. In reality, in September of 1876, 16-year-old Billy Bonney was in Bonita, Arizona, working as a cook and stealing horses and saddles from Fort Grant soldiers. And Billy had no gang, then or ever, and was never in Colorado. Sources provided the Billy the Kid gang. Garrett stated, after the Lincoln County War, the Kid gathered together such of his gang as were fit for duty. The December 3, 1880 Las Vegas Gazette gave the Santa Fe Rings outlaw myth of Billy the Kid with desperado stronghold. It stated, "The gang is under the leadership of Billy the Kid, a desperate cuss." No outlaws named Schneider or his murder victim Happy Jack were in Colorado papers in Blandina's 1872 to 1877 residence. But a matching tale with named doctors was in a January 10, 1877, El Moro, Colorado, the Enterprise and Chronicle obituary for a John M. Snyder, spelled Snyder. Snyder had been shot accidentally in the thigh by R.I. Donaldson, nicknamed Happy Jack. Snyder's treating doctors were listed as Rogers, Cushing, and Beshore, and his mother, sister, and brother were present at his death. It's obvious that this obituary inspired Blandina's tale. Journal entry 2 gives Blandina's first meeting with Billy the Kid, in which he stops his scalping of Trinidad's doctors. It's dated October 5, 1876 in her magazine, but is edited into the September 1876 entry in the 1932 and 1948 books. Her gang members are also edited, with the magazine leaving a blank for one's name, filled in by the books as Chisholm, Chism. The dates have no connection to Billy the Kid history. In 1876, he was in Bonita, Arizona. The Chisholm name came from later research though he had nothing to do with an outlaw gang. Garrett's book had, quote, "The principals in the Lincoln County War were on one side John S. Chisholm, spelled Chisum." Excerpted, Blandina wrote, "Saturday, 2 p.m. came, and I went to meet Billy and his gang. The introduction was given. I can only remember Billy, our captain, and Chisholm. The leader, Billy, has steel blue eyes, is young, one would take him to be 17, innocent looking, save for the corners of his eyes. My glance took this description in while Billy was saying, 'We are all glad to see you, sister, and I want to say it would give me pleasure to do you a favor,' in exchange for nursing his gang member. I took the hand, saying, 'I understand you have come to scalp our Trinidad physicians, which act I ask you to cancel.' Not only that, sister, but at any time my pals and I can serve you. You will find us ready." Garrett, as a source, had emphasized Billy's eyes as, quote, "deep blue." Those who knew him would always watch his eyes for an exhibition of anger. As to scalping, it seems the worst atrocity Blandina could conceive. It was actually associated with Native Americans or with bounty hunters of Native Americans. No reference was made in Colorado papers from 1872 to 1877 when she was there to a scalping by an outlaw. But on January 1st, 1876, the Colorado Springs Gazette mentioned a boy named Pomeroy who murdered after reading dime novels about scalping. This may have been her inspiration. Journal entry 3 reported that Billy the Kid's gang was terrorizing from Trinidad, Colorado to La Glorieta, New Mexico. It was dated Feast of All Saints, 1876, in the magazine and books. In reality, in 1876, Billy was in Bonita, Arizona, and never had a gang. Journal entry 4 reported travel worries because of Billy the Kid's highwaymen. It followed Blandina's entry about her trip from Trinidad to her new posting in Santa Fe. It was dated December 16, 1876 in the magazine, just December 1876 in the 1932 book, and back to the full date in the 1948 book. Blandina wrote, "Billy's gang is quite active on the plains. When we arrived at Agua Dulce, Sweetwater, all at the place were prepared to fight the gang and its leader if attacked." In reality, Billy was then in Bonita, Arizona, and had no gang. Journal entry 5 had Santa Fe's Archbishop Lamy asking Blandina to travel with a family named Staub because they feared Billy the Kid's attacks. It was dated May 1877 in the magazine, March 1878 in the 1932 book, and the fourth week in May 1877 in the 1948 book. Blandina wrote to supposed recipient Justina, "If you ever get this journal, you will see how very little fear I have of Billy's gang. I'm marked for protection." In reality, Billy did not leave Bonita, Arizona until August 17, 1877. For 1878, he was a deputy and a regulator trying to arrest John Tunstall's murderers in Lincoln County. He had no gang. Journal entry 6 has Blandina's second Billy the Kid encounter. The magazine date is June 9, 1877. The 1932 book is June 9, 1878. The 1948 book is then back to June 9, 1877. Blandina presents Billy intercepting the carriage, carrying her and the Staub family. Excerpted, she wrote, I shifted my big bonnet. Our eyes met. He raised his large-brimmed hat with a wave and a bow, looked his recognition, fairly flew a distance of about 3 rods, then stopped to give us some of his wonderful antics and bronco maneuvers. In reality, in 1877, Billy was in Bonita, Arizona, and in 1878, fighting in the Lincoln County War as a regulator. Journal Entry 7, with Blandina now in Santa Fe, reports the arrival of Lew Wallace as governor, depredations of the Billy the Kid gang, and attempts a backstory for Billy. In the magazine entry, dated October 1st, 1878, Billy is close friends with Lawrence Murphy, called a cattle king. Billy swears vengeance at his bedside in Blandina's Santa Fe hospital as Murphy dies from a gunshot wound by McSween's men, spelled M-C-S-W-A-I-N. Billy is quoted, "Everyone connected to the shooting would kiss the ground." This may count as Blandina's third Billy the Kid encounter, since she writes it like a witness. The 1932 book jumps the date to October 1st, 1879, and switches Billy's friend to John Tunstall, whose murder Billy wants to revenge. For the 1948 book, Teresa Martin changed the date back to October 1st, 1878, and kept Tunstall. As to Lew Wallace, Blandina writes, "He has a difficult task before him, not the least of which will be to check the depredations being committed by Billy and his gang." In reality, in October of 1878, Billy was in Tascosa, Texas, selling stock rustled from ringites, and he had no gang. The use of Murphy and Tunstall names show research. Friend Murphy is a fatal error. Lawrence Murphy was a local ring boss, enemy of Billy's side in the Lincoln County War, and died of alcoholism. Blandina's likely source, tracked by misspelling of McSween, is ringbacking Ralph Emerson Twitchell. He'd written, "After the killing of Tunstall, his sympathizers organized themselves into a party known as the McSwain, spelled M-C-S-W-A-I-N, faction. The words cattle king came from Garrett, but mixed up Lawrence Murphy and John Chisholm. The revenge motive was lifted from Garrett and Burns. Garrett wrote, 'The Kid was appraised of Tunstall's death, breathing vengeance from that day. His track was blazed with rapine and blood.' Burns wrote, 'Tunstall had been his friend and his employer. The Kid threw himself into the feud to avenge his friend's death.'" Journal Entry 8 reports on Billy, whom Blandina now calls her, quote, "old acquaintance," and has him failing a so-called interview with Lew Wallace, who offers a reward because of his continued outlawry. The dates differ wildly. The magazine is September 1879, the 1932 book is January 1881, and the 1948 book has Teresa Martin guessing January 1880. The magazine's text has a made-up Lincoln County War with the Friend Murphy era. Blandina wrote, "Few know the reason that started Billy the Kid on his downward course. It was gratitude. Gratitude to Mr. Murphy, one of the cattle bosses of Lincoln County. I will give you the gist of what today is called the Lincoln County War. At the yearly roundup, cowboys working for cattle bosses aim to arrive first with their herds at the best watering place. The first group that reaches the place has the right of possession for that season. two groups arrived simultaneously, each claiming to be first, and the war began. In the conflict, Mr. Murphy was mortally wounded, though Billy exposed his life to save him. It was at Mr. Murphy's dying bed at our hospital that Billy took the path to make every man kiss the earth who was in any way implicated in Mr. Murphy's death. Both books delete this fatal Friend Murphy error while keeping the rest of the text. That left, quote, "My old acquaintance, Billy the Kid, is using his gun freely. The people of the territory are aroused and demand his capture, dead or alive. Our governor, Lewis Wallace, has shown heroic bravery by going to Lincoln County to try to pacify the storm. He had a number of interviews with Billy, but to no effect. New rewards have been offered both by the governor and the people to capture Billy." The wildly differing dates of 1879, 1880, and 1881 show attempted fix-ups, and all are meaningless. For example, in the 1932 book for January 1881, Blandina claimed Wallace's coming to Lincoln when he actually went in March of 1879 after Houston Chapman's murder, and the January 1880 claim of reward notices is a year too early, with Wallace's first reward offer being December 22, 1880. And removing the Friend Murphy error for the 1932 book pinpoints a 20th century fix-up date, proving no Frontier Journal entry. The sources can be traced. A New York Sun article titled "Outlaws of New Mexico" is literally paraphrased, stating, "Governor Wallace a few days ago offered a reward of $500 for Billy's capture, and prominent citizens would make up a handsome person addition." Also used was Wallace's June 8, 1902 New York World Magazine article titled "General Lew Wallace Writes a Romance of Billy the Kid." The giveaway is the lifted word "interview." It's Wallace's only article calling the pardon bargain meeting an interview. It stated, "General Wallace was able to effect an important arrangement with the outlaw, explaining the purpose of the interview and its result with Billy." The Lincoln County war fable of cattlemen competing for a waterhole appears inspired by Twitchell, who hid the real uprising against the Santa Fe Ring. He wrote, "The cause of the Lincoln County War can be traced to the rivalry existing between prominent cattlemen at the time living in Lincoln and the Pecos Valley, respectively." Also parroted was a note in Garrett's book's 1927 edition by historian Maurice Garland Fulton about Wallace coming to Lincoln. Fulton wrote, "Wallace promptly came to Fort Stanton and took personal charge of the efforts to stamp out the new appearance of lawlessness." Journal entry 9 reports on so-called high pranks by Billy the Kid and rewards for him. The dates differed while keeping the same text. The magazine is July 23, 1880. The 1932 book is July 23, 1881. And the 1948 book edit returns to July 23, 1880. From Santa Fe, Blandina wrote, "Billy the Kid is playing high pranks. The governor and the people in the territory have offered big rewards for his capture, dead or alive." In reality, this is filler to maintain the Billy the Kid hook. In July of 1880, there were no rewards offered for Billy, and the actual rewards by Lew Wallace were for capture only. Journal entry 10 reports Billy the Kid's marauding. The magazine's dating is March 1881, the 1932 book March 1882, and the 1948 book, Returning to March 1881. They have the same text. From Santa Fe, Blandina wrote, excerpted, Billy the Kid's marauding has drawn the attention of the whole territory. He intends undoing Governor Wallace. Friends of law and order are on the qui vive, Latin for high alert, that no harm come to the author of Ben-Hur. In reality, in 1882, Billy was dead. In March of 1881, he was either in the Santa Fe jail or at his first Messiah hanging trial, and he had no gang. The sources were Lew Wallace's Outlaw Myth articles lying that Billy, not he, betrayed the pardon bargain. He made up that Billy had a vendetta against him. Wallace's December 10th, 1893 San Francisco Chronicle article titled Lew Wallace's Foe Threatened by Billy the Kid is actually paraphrased. It stated, the news of the escape of Billy the Kid from Lincoln's jail quickly reached Santa Fe, and Governor Wallace's friends became very uneasy lest the Kid should carry out his threat. Journal entry 11 gives a backstory for Blandina to insert herself into Billy the Kid's Santa Fe jailing. She claims his cellmate, called only Kelly, had murdered her so-called tenderfoot patient who was a prospector in so-called Los Carrillos. The magazine is April 24, 1881. The 1932 book is April 24, 1882. And the 1948 book is edited back to April 24, 1881. The magazine text differs somewhat from the books, which are the same. From Santa Fe, Blandina wrote that she had warned her tenderfoot patient about showing off wealth. She stated, when one of the miners named Kelly saw our patient so well groomed, he said to him, you have no right to be among us, and with his words went the shot that killed him. She added that Kelly was, quote, now in jail with Billy the Kid, who had attempted to carry out his threat against Governor Wallace, but the latter was well guarded by every honest man in the territory, hence Billy's capture. My first free hours will be to visit the prisoners. In reality, on April 24, 1881, Billy was in Lincoln's courthouse jail. On April 24, 1882, he was dead. Unaware of why Billy was captured, the entry uses Wallace's fictional articles about Billy's vendetta against him to fabricate Billy's murder attempt. Journal entry 12 is Blandina's third meeting with Billy by a visit to the Santa Fe jail, though it's a fourth if one counts her friend Murphy tale at her Santa Fe hospital. The magazine is May 16, 1881. The 1932 book is May 16, 1882. And the 1948 book is edited back to May 16, 1881. Also, just the magazine has a flashback to Blandina's nursing gang member Schneider and stopping Billy's scalping of Trinidad's doctors. From Santa Fe, excerpted, Blandina wrote, I have just returned from the jail. The two prisoners were chained hands and feet. When I got into the prison cell and Billy saw me, he said, as though we had met yesterday instead of 4 years ago, I wish I could place a chair for you, sister. At a glance, I saw one backless chair upon which sat Kelly, the man who shot our patient. The kid said to me, do what you can for Kelly. This is his first offense. Think, dear Sister Justina, how many crimes may have been prevented had someone had influence over Billy after his first murder. Finding himself captain and dictator with no religious principles to check him, he became what he is, the greatest murderer of the Southwest. In reality, the magazine's repeat of Schneider and Scalper Billy seems a literary vehicle to remind readers following the long series about the storyline. As to sources, Blandina got Billy, the Greatest Murderer, from the subtitle of Garrett's book, The Authentic Life of Billy the Kid, which was the noted desperado of the Southwest, whose deeds of daring and blood made his name a terror in New Mexico, Arizona, and northern Mexico. The book portrayed Billy as evil, stating the kid had a devil lurking in him. It was a cruel and bloodthirsty fiend. Burns wrote, Billy placed no value on human life. He killed a man as nonchalantly as he smoked a cigarette. The jail meeting with Kelly and Billy the Kid is fiction. Real Billy was not there at her visit dates. He was there from December 27, 1880 to March 28, 1881. For her May 16, 1881, he was on the run after escaping Lincoln's jail. For her May 16, 1882, he was dead. Also, from December 27, 1880 to February 28, 1881, Billy was in a cell with his associates Dave Rudabaugh and Billy Wilson, along with an Edward Kelly. But on February 28th, they were caught tunneling out. Billy was then put in solitary until his March 28, 1881 transport to Mesilla for his hanging trials. The only time Blandina could have seen Billy in a cell with Kelly was from December 27, 1880 to February 27, 1881, not the date she gave. But Rudabaugh and Wilson would have been there, though she claimed only Kelly. Also, Billy told a reporter, as well as writing to Lou Wallace, that he was allowed no visitors. Also, Blandina claims that Billy recognized her from 4 years earlier. But with magazine dating, it makes it May of 1877, when he was in Arizona, and the 1932 book's dating makes it May of 1878, when he was in the Lincoln County War. In 1987, Kelly's biography was published by Philip J. Rash in the Quarterly of the National Association and Center for Outlaw and Lawman History as The Curious Case of Edward M. Kelly. He had murdered a John Reardon on October 13, 1880, in the mining town of Carbonateville in the Cerrillos mining district. A past miner, Kelly had started a dance hall in Carbonateville with a partner. They and 2 men went drinking at a saloon. There, Kelly argued with one of the 2 men about paying the bill. A spectator named John Reardon sided with that man. Kelly tried to stab Reardon, left, returned with a carbine, and shot him dead. So, Blandina's tenderfoot patient, victim, was made up, along with the murder site of Los Corrillos, Corrilos, lifted from the Cerrillos, Cerrillos, mining district. Blandina's Kelly had no first name because the newspaper sources about Billy the Kid's jailing lacked it. For example, the March 23, 1881 Santa Fe Daily New Mexican reported, among the inmates at present are Billy the Kid, Dave Rudabaugh, Kelly, and Billy Wilson. Journal entry 13 reports the killing of Billy the Kid with a backstory. The magazine date is August 1881. The 1932 book is September 8th, 1882. The 1948 edit is September 8th, 1881. The magazine uses the Friend Murphy fiction to explain Billy's killings. The books omit that era and claim Billy murdered since age 12. For the magazine, from Albuquerque, Blandina wrote, Poor Billy the Kid was shot by Sheriff Patrick Garrett of Lincoln County. That ends the career of one who began his downward course by taking revenge for the death of one who had befriended him, Mr. Murphy. Only now have I learned his proper name, William H. Bonney. The book's text stated, Poor Billy the Kid was shot by Sheriff Patrick F. Garrett of Lincoln County. That ends the career of one who began his downward course at the age of 12 years by taking revenge for the insult that had been offered to his mother. Only now have I learned his proper name, William H. Bonney. The 12-year-old murderer era reveals the sources. Garrett's book's convoluted fiction stated, when young Billy was about 12 years of age, he first imbrued his hand with human blood. Billy's mother was passing a knot of idlers on the street. One of the loafers made an insulting remark about her. Billy heard it. The book has him punch the insulter, then try to hit him with a rock, but a kind man intervenes to stop his later shooting of that insulter. Later, Billy sees the kind man attacked in a saloon and fatally stabs the attacker. Burns copied Garrett's tale. Journal entry 14 reports that Billy the Kid's gang was gone. The magazine date is election time 1891. The 1932 and 1948 books had August 1889. The texts are the same. Visiting Trinidad, Blandina wrote, Trinidad has lost its frontier aspect. The jail is now built to hold its inmates. Billy the Kid's gang is dissolved. The dates are meaningless and appear a literary vehicle to repeat the Billy the Kid hook. And Billy was never in Trinidad and had no gang. Other journal entries name-dropped other historical figures, but with Apache Chief Victorio, Blandina again wrote herself into the history. The date for the magazine and books is February 2nd, 1886. The texts are identical. From Albuquerque, she wrote, Not only is Geronimo riding at large, but Victorio and other captains also. Last week, Sister Catherine and myself visited one of the grading camps and stood on a mound where the day before Victorio had scalped 2 of the working men. In fact, in 1886, Victorio had been dead for 6 years, having been massacred with his band in Mexico in October of 1880. It was still possible to exonerate Blandina. The first edition of her magazine, dated October 1926, was missing. Did it have an introduction explaining fictionalizing? The Sisters of Charity of Cincinnati's archivist found one in another collection. Its foreword by Blandina's associate editor and Anna C. Minogue stated, As Sister Blandina's journal unfolds, you will be shown the West of olden times, and we promise you thrills that the novelist would not dare to offer, truth being stronger than fiction. The obvious solution would have been checking Blandina's actual journal, but recall that she claimed to have destroyed it when writing the magazine articles. But did it ever exist? She hinted about its real nature. In a magazine entry of September 1879, she described hoarded notes. She wrote, "Dear Sister Justina, looking over the scribblings I wrote on scraps since January, I noticed that they were not entered into this journal. I've condensed the scraps, and here is the result." Her magazine entry dated cherry season 1884 had in parentheses scraps found in Saratoga trunk. Or for a magazine entry for just 1886, she wrote, "From my notes taken at different times, you, Justina, may read some facts." All this brings to mind her first Billy the Kid entry dated September 1876. She wrote, "My scattered notes on Billy the Kid's gang are condensed, and someday you, Justina, will be thrilled by their perusal." So, her scraps, notes, and press clippings may have been her so-called journal. Its becoming, dated entries, may have begun when she was 76, with the 1926 magazine series. Then the 1932 book attempted fix-ups by research. What about Blandina's backer's notion that she mistook Arthur Pond, a.k.a. Billy Leroy, for Billy the Kid? There exists an 1881 Police Gazette series dime novel published by Richard K. Fox titled Billy Leroy, the Colorado Bandit, thought to be authored by Thomas Daggett. But Daggett made up that Leroy was called Billy the Kid by fusing a bit of Colorado highwayman Leroy's history with extensively plagiarized text of Billy the Kid's outlaw myth press. In fact, there's a chance that Blandina used Daggett's fakery to build her Billy the Kid fable of her Colorado highwayman. Blandina's apologist cited a 1986 book by Donald Klein titled Alias Billy the Kid, the man behind the legend, to argue for two Billy the Kids, with Billy Leroy being the original. But Klein had merely parroted Thomas Daggett and Blandina herself. Billy Leroy's legitimate biographer is Mark Dugan in 1987's Bandit Years, A Gathering of Wolves. He makes clear that Arthur Pond's outlaw career was just 8 months, from 1880 to 1881, that he was not called Billy the Kid, and that he never was in the Santa Fe jail. In mid-1880, Pond left West Liberty, Iowa, for Colorado, so was not in Trinidad in 1876 as Blandina's Billy. And by 1880, when he was in Colorado, she was in Santa Fe. In mid-September of 1880, Pond partnered with a highwayman and took the alias Billy Leroy. Their Colorado stage robberies were on September 23rd and October 7th and 14th. Pond then went to Iowa and Denver, where he was arrested in January of 1881. Sentenced in March to 10 years in prison, he escaped. He then enlisted his brother, Silas Pond, who took the alias Sam Potter, for a Colorado stage holdup on May 18, 1881, about Blandina's dating of her Billy the Kid jail visit. The Pond boys were then captured. On May 23rd, seized from jail, they were lynched. None of this matched Blandina's Billy, nor did she call him Billy Leroy. She called him William H. Bonney. Nevertheless, I sympathized with Blandina's backers, so I checked another Billy who was really in the Santa Fe jail with Billy Bonney. Billy's Stinking Springs capture included Billy Wilson. Did Blandina visit Billy Wilson alone with a man named Kelly, thinking he was Billy the Kid? There were 2 points when Wilson could have been alone with Kelly in the cell after both Billy Bonney and Dave Rudabaugh were removed. They were March 23rd to 28th, when Wilson was then taken with Bonney to Mesilla for trials. Wilson was returned on March 30th, when he could have been alone with Kelly for some time. But Blandina said she recognized this Billy from Trinidad. That required Wilson being there in 1876. His biographer, William Kelleher, in his 1957 book, Violence in Lincoln County, claimed Wilson was 18 in 1880, making him too young for an 1876 gang leader. And he was not a murderer or a gang leader or called the Kid. He didn't work as Blandina's Billy. Blandina's backers, responding to my doubts, then postulated that 16-year-old Billy Bonney had ridden in September of 1876 from Bonita, Arizona, where history placed him, to Trinidad, Colorado, where he was known as the famous scalping highwayman Billy the Kid, though the moniker didn't exist until 1879. This also required Cook and Petty Thief Billy to ride 422 as the crow flies miles, much longer in real terrain, on presumably incredible horses and over the almost 8,000-foot Raton Pass in the snowy Sangre de Cristo Mountains to get to Trinidad, then rush back to Bonita to be locked up in Fort Grant's jail by March of 1877 as a juvenile delinquent stealing military horses, then in June 9th, 1877, to rush to northern New Mexico to attack the Staub traveling group as Blandina's lone highwayman before returning to Bonita to kill Wendy Cahill on August 17, 1877. This is supervillain fiction, not history. But is it possible that an unknown person wrote the magazine's Billy the Kid entries without busy Blandina's knowledge, with their being copied into the books also without her knowledge? I had asked the Sisters of Charity archivist to search for any document about creating the magazine articles. She found a single page dated 1932 that cracked the Nun'S Tale hoax. It was all that was left of a report by the original typists, Lucy Camella and Carmela Cassano, about how Blandina turned her journal entries into articles. They wrote, "It is recorded in her journal, Billy the Kid and the gang were going to kill the doctors who neglected to take care of his wounded pal. Sister Blandina approached Billy the Kid to spare the life of the doctors. Traveling by stagecoach, Billy the Kid and his gang were about to attack the coach. When he came near enough, Sister Blandina leaned forward so she could be seen and recognized. Billy the Kid saw her, doffed his hat gallantly, wheeled around, and left. There were many other instances in her hand-written journal which have either been lost or destroyed. When these articles were being prepared for publication in the magazine, I worked with Sister Blandina in her office. Reams of paper rolled and packed in boxes were taken out, inspected, and either handed to me to be typed or thrown into the basket. Often, as she read these silently before she handed them to me to be typed or thrown in the basket, Sister would add comments to what she had written. Had a tape recorder been available at this time, a wealth of history, both of the West and the community, would have been preserved. I named it the Carmela Cassano paper. It proved that Blandina was the article's author, fashioning her tales out loud at their typing as she perused her papers stored more than 50 years. Some she kept secret by destroying. Some she had Lucy and Carmela copy before disposing of them. Some she just ad-libbed, leaving Lucy and Carmela wishing they could have taped her, quote, wealth of history. So, the journal to share with her sister Justina was just a literary device. There's no mention by the transcriptionist that the papers were previously unpacked, though by 1926 Blandina had been back in Cincinnati with Justina for 29 years. Also, since Carmela and Cassano noted that it was, quote, recorded in Blandina's journal about Billy the Kid and the gang's planned killing of the doctors, and about her Billy the Kid encounter on the plains, one can conclude that Blandina had jotted her basic fables in the 19th century, then elaborated them for her magazine. That matched her already mentioned descriptions of creating entries from notes, scribblings, and scraps. So I reconstructed what happened. During her time in the Old West, Blandina collected items of interest to her. Some were scribbled fictional tales, some were descriptions of real events, some were current events sources. They were unpacked decades later to create content for Santa Maria Institute's magazine. To justify a serial, they were called journal entries with dates guessed or by research. Such was Blandina's literary skill, she could dictate around the scraps for innocently typing Lucy Camella and Carmela Cassano. Then, for her 1932 book, she used 20th century history books and old newspaper articles for attempted fix-ups. This leaves no doubt that her intent was to deceive and to impersonate being Billy the Kid's pal. But the big mystery remained. Why did Sister Blandina hoax Billy the Kid? She had so many real accomplishments to validate her self-esteem. She didn't match other imposters, sociopathic losers faking achievement. One can only guess, so I did. Was Blandina writing parables to save lost souls, like her fictional gang member Schneider and her Billy the Kid? As she wrote for her book's May 16th, 1882 entry, "Think, dear Sister Justina, how many crimes might have been prevented had someone had influence over Billy after his first murder." Or did Blandina suffer from folie à deux, meaning two people sharing one delusion? Her original audience was her future magazine's associate editor, Anna Minogue. After hearing the tales for years, Minogue wrote in the article's foreword, "I begged her to write an account of the romantic, tragic, historic adventures and events." Repeatedly lying to Minogue could have made Blandina believe, too. That could explain her never recanting. A clue is her September 25, 1927 letter to Minogue, reprinted in the magazine, about her return trip to the Southwest. For her, Blandina created yet another Billy the Kid fable. The letter stated, "In my time, Gallup was particularly noted as the place where Mr. Patrick Garrett lived. when rewards were offered from many places in New Mexico for the capture of the notorious Billy the Kid, dead or alive. Mr. Garrett followed Billy the Kid's trail to Maxwell's ranch, where he shot him dead. Note that Garrett lived in Roswell, 282 miles away, not Gallup. Or was Blandina joking? Her entries are filled with her exuberant humor and pranks. Recall that her magazine's audience was Italian immigrants served by her Santa Maria Institute, where her intent, besides maintaining their faith, was providing entertainment. For example, her entry dated 1886, allegedly to Justina, said, "If we ever meet and have time to review the many serious, humorous, and ludicrous situations I have found myself in, our health will receive 100% to its credit by laughter." But when New Mexico's dupe governor, Richard C. Dillon, praised her for writing history, she never set him straight. Or did Blandina believe cartoon-like Billy the Kid was free pickings? In her lifetime, Billy had lurid fabricated press. By the 20th century, he was in Hollywood movies. Nonetheless, Blandina hoaxed not just Billy, but their relationship. Or was Blandina a gullible victim? Her backers, trying to counter my accusations, wondered if she had been the nurse for John M. Snyder from the obituary about his being accidentally shot by R.I. Donaldson, a.k.a. Happy Jack. What if he had told her tall tales about Billy the Kid, which she recorded? But John M. Snyder's January 1877 death preceded Billy's outlaw reputation and moniker, and it omits Blandina's claims of personal encounters. Or did Blandina just yield to temptation? Did unexpected acclaim for her Billy the Kid adventures inhibit her confessing to their fiction? It's obviously impossible to know with certainty why Sister Blandina became a Billy the Kid history hoaxer, but she did. And her demonic fake, Billy the Kid, damaged real Billy Bonney and his fellow freedom fighters by burying the truth. The next talks are about old-timer imposters claiming to be Billy the Kid. As Blandina Segale showed, faking a journal to impersonate being Billy the Kid's friend was hard enough. Being Billy was impossible.